Righty. So I will hand over to Jabin. Thanks, mate.
Can you guys hear me okay? I don't know if you can hear me.
Gotcha, mate.
Daniel, interrupt me if you can hear me okay. Or if you can't hear me anyways. But yeah, thanks for everyone being here. I like Daniel said, I'm from Canada. I'm on the West Coast. And so I'm probably the closest to Australia than anyone else in Canada, just because it's only a few minutes away to the Pacific Ocean from me. And it is cold here. It's winter. I was showing Daniel earlier this. We got a ton of snow just yesterday, and it buried the entire studio. And so again, thank you for having me. I wish I was there with you right now in the summertime down in Australia, but I'll have to wait a few more months. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. Today, we're going to be cooking, first of all, this pork loin. This is a rib half section. This is one of my absolute favorite cuts of meat because it's so versatile, and we'll get into that in a few moments. But if you've never been to my channel or ever seen any of the rubs or anything like that, just a little bit about me. I got started with barbecue back when I was a kid. Always enjoyed it, always enjoyed cooking over live fire and all that stuff. And then when I became a parent, when I had my first kid, that's when I started to really get back into it. And it wasn't until my second kid, I got 3 boys. It wasn't until my second kid was born. He was born with a bunch of food allergies and really could only eat meat and salad. So we couldn't go out anywhere. We couldn't do anything fun like that. And so I told myself, I love grilling. And so one of the things I'm going to commit to doing is learning how to make the best barbecue I could so that I could feed my family well. And so fast forward another 7 or so, 8 years. And here we are. Postal Barbecue has come around. And that's sort of the origins of why I got into barbecuing and making rubs and all that stuff. And so around that time, I had a video production company. And so I was watching videos on YouTube with, this background in video production and video marketing. And I said to myself, I can do this. I can continue to learn and I can use my skill set and, just begin to offer help and content to people who were just like me 7, 8 plus years ago, learning how to cook over charcoal for the first time. So thank you for being here. I'm really glad that you joined into this masterclass. Like I said, we're talking all about pork loin today. Also, one last thing. Daniel had mentioned, you guys are the exclusive carrier of the Coleslaw Barbecue Rub. We got the original, we got the Mad Cow. We have the chicken rub. I absolutely love this chicken rub, especially on veggies and potatoes. Oh my goodness, it is just crushing it right now for me. And so if you haven't yet jumped onto the Rub Society's website, go over there and take a look at the rubs because like Danny said, they are outstanding. And I'm a little bit biased, but they're my go-to rub. And I have a lot of rubs sent to me. So that said, like I said, we're cooking today a pork loin. This is the rib half section. So when it comes to pork loin, I think it's probably one of the most versatile cuts just because, first of all, like it's a little bit hard to see. Here, let me grab this, get you a better look here. See, this is just one of the sections of the pork loin. This is called the rib half section. If you were to continue to go over, which side is it? Over to this side and keep going, you have the center cut, and then you eventually get to the tailbone of the pig, which is the sirloin cut. And with all of these different sections, they kind of require a little bit of a different cooking method, but at the end of the day, temperature is always king when it comes to pork loin because pork loin is traditionally a little bit more of a leaner cut. And so when you're cooking pork loin, it's very, 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 very important not to overcook it. And speaking of that, I do need to monitor my temperatures because this pork loin is taking a little bit longer because, like I said, we are in freezing cold temperatures today. And so it's cooking just a touch slower than normal. So that being said, this is the rib section of the pork loin. And one of the things that I love about this cut specifically is that it has a similarity to the center cut, which is a little bit leaner. And here, I'm going to pull you in again a little bit closer to take a look at the top. And so you can see that this portion here is the more traditional pork loin. This is your leaner cut. Then surrounding all of it is your fattier meats. And this portion here is the portion where the ribs would have joined onto it. So this is a boneless pork loin. And, you know, the fact that you get the leanness of the pork loin, but then the fattier section that it was connected at one point to the ribs just makes for an outstanding cut of meat. And you know, you feel there's a little bit of a texture difference from the fattier portions, and the leaner portions are a little bit more tender. But the flip side, you know, one's more tender, one's less tender. The flip side is one is more fatty, which means more juicy, and the other one is a little bit more lean and can dry out a lot faster. And so that's what we're trying to avoid when it comes to pork loin. Again, pork loin is one of those cuts that is so versatile. If you were to take this and you know, cut it down yourself, whether it's this section or the center cut or the sirloin section of it, you can do pretty much anything you want, from center cut chops to sirloin roast. You can leave the bones in if it comes with bones attached to it. And you can make some boneless or bone-in chops with it. You can cut it up into cubes. If the ribs are still attached, you could leave it on and do a crown roast. You could remove the ribs and have two sections. You can have the ribs. You can have the pork loin and do two different cooks. You could cure this thing and make some Canadian back bacon. I'm telling you, the opportunities for what you can do with this is endless. And so today I want to show you, first of all, how to prepare and cook this rib section of the pork loin for my absolute favorite thing to cook. And if you follow the YouTube channel, you've seen me cook this once before on there. And I call this a faux pulled pork sandwich. And the reason is because, you know, traditionally pulled pork is like iconic barbecue, right? And so it takes, you know, 10 plus hours. It's smoky, it's delicious, it's fall apart. But at the end of the day, it takes at least 10 hours plus some rest time to get it done the way you want it. And so this, however, this is about a 2-hour cook, maybe 2.5 hours, depending on the size. And you're left with not a pulled consistency, but you're left with a similar flavor profile to what you would get with a pork, with pulled pork, sorry. And so that is why I love doing this, because this is something that you can do when you get home from work. You can prep it before you leave for work, then get home, fire up the grill, throw it on, and by 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, you're feasting on delicious barbecue, just like you would have done on a weekend cooking 10, 12 hours. I'm telling you, this is one of my favorite things, and for good reason. So, so like I said, this is the pork loin rib half. I'm going to bring you in a bit closer again. That lighting is not showing the color really, but you can see here that there's that rib portion that just looks really nice. On the back side, let's flip it over. You'll see that it's just full of fat. This is a big old fat cap. And so when I'm choosing one of these guys, I'm looking for the full fat cap to be on, because this is a softer fat. This fat is going to not necessarily render down like bacon, but it's going to soften up, and it's going to provide a lot of extra flavor. And so when I'm looking at this roast specifically, this one here actually has a little bit larger of a fat cap on it than some of the other ones I've gotten over the years. And so this one on the side here, it's a little bit hard to see because it's a little bit blown out. This one is about a ½ inch on this side, and on this side, it's about 1/4 inch on this side. And so what I would do normally is I would trim the entire surface of this fat cap down to about 1/4 inch, similar to like doing a brisket or something like that, because we want that fat in there to add that little bit of extra flavor, as well as, you know, when you're cutting it at the end. And cutting this for what we're doing is very important. And we'll get to that at the end. Yeah, we just want that extra flavor of that fat. And so I'm just going to quickly go ahead. And so I have a sharp, this is a boning knife. It's got a little bit of flex to it. It's not overly flexy. That's what I prefer. If you have really any thinner knife works great for trimming fat, for trimming silver skin, any of that stuff. And so basically what we're going to do, and I'm not going to trim the entire thing because that's going to take too much time. But what we're going to do is I'm going to just trim some of this fat off, and we're going to get it down to about 1/4 inch. And so normally when I'm doing this, I would take a little bit more time and just kind of get it looking really nice. So just look at all this nice fat. And so what you could do with this, I'm a big believer in saving your scraps, because you can make sausage, you can render it down into some like tallow, or I guess this wouldn't be tallow. This would be, I guess it would be a sort of tallow. When I think tallow, I think beef. But when I think bacon grease, that's kind of what I'm thinking. But it's a little bit different flavor than that as well, because it's not smoked yet. And so again, we're just going to quickly trim some of the bulk of this off. You can see that I'm starting to get into the meat a little bit. One of the things I'm really looking for here is that there's a little bit of a sharp edge right on the end. And so I'm just going to kind of round that off, because when it comes to cooking and using airflow to your advantage, you want your whatever meat you're cooking to have nice aerodynamics, just because this is going to help with how the air flows over your meat, just giving a better overall end result. And so basically that is all that I'm going to do to this one. Like I said, if I was doing this for a video or for family or whatever, I would take a little more time and just sort of clean this up a little bit nicer. And then on the top side, let's see here. Let's see if that, okay, you can see that a little bit. The top side, there isn't really much we need to do. We're going to leave all of this fat on here. It's kind of just weaving it throughout the cut here. And so when it comes time to seasoning this, what I like to do typically with a cut, especially when it's this big, is I like to season it, but then let it sit for a couple hours or so. And wait, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. When it comes to seasoning, I usually like to start with the bottom side first, because when we're seasoning, we always want our presentation side to be done last, because it's a presentation. We want it to look as good as possible. And so today I'm going to be putting the fat cap down, and this is going to make this meat side face up, allowing our rub to really sit and rest on that meat, firming up, creating a little bit of a bark. It's only about a 2-hour cook, so your bark isn't going to form up a ton, but it's still going to sort of cake onto the meat specifically. If you had your fat cap face up, then your rub doesn't stick to fat as much, as well as the salts don't penetrate through it as fast. And so if you're going to do that, you want to put your rub on in far enough in advance for the salts to go through the fat, which is a bit slower, into the meat. And so again, we're starting with the fat cap facing up. And so whenever I'm doing this, I like to put a little bit of a binder onto the surface for our rub to stick to, because a lot of people say you don't need a binder when you are cooking. But one of the things that I find is that a binder helps you to put a little bit more rub on. And when you're doing a big roast like this, it can handle a lot of seasoning. And the more seasoning means the more flavor, especially when you're cutting it really thin. And so oftentimes I just grab some prepared yellow mustard, or sometimes I'll grab some hot sauce and slather that on there, some olive oil. It really doesn't matter what you use, just something that makes the outside surface a little bit more tacky. So today I chose mustard because it's sort of readily available. And so I'm just going to put a little bit of that onto the outside surface and just rub that in. This might be a little bit too much. So I'm just going to flip this over and space it out a bit. I hope you guys are getting some stuff out of this. I forgot to mention, if you look on this side here, this section right here, it's a little bit of a flap. This is where if you're looking at the pig and thinking, you know, where does this cut come from? This is the shoulder blade. This is where it gets closer to, you know, like your Boston butt or your pork picnic shoulder, which is sort of along the same area. So we got the picnic shoulder, then the Boston butt up here, right? And then this portion right here, that little flap, it would be sort of like right around that area, then going down the back. And then on the other end is where the pork tenderloin is from. And so we got our roast all slathered in that that yellow mustard. And today, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be using the Coleslaw BBQ Original Rub. And the reason I'm using this one is because it has the sugars that we're looking for. Shoot, I forgot to open this. And my hand's dirty. What do I do? Here we go. Take that off. Give it a little bit of a shake. And so basically, yeah, we're using the original rub today because this one has some of the sugars that really complements pork nicely. If you're doing like a beef roast, I would recommend the Mad Cow. This one is absolutely phenomenal. I have some friends down in the States that use this in competitions for briskets and are placing in the top 3. So you know what's good. The chicken rub, like Daniel said, this is amazing stuff. And so you really can't go wrong. If you had any 3 of these rubs, it would go perfect on this pork loin. And so basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this and I'm going to liberally apply our barbecue rub to the outside surface. Again, we're starting with that fat cap. There we go, make sure we get our ends. And I'm gonna sneak some right into that cavity. You could trim that off, but because we are cooking this with fat cap down, that little flap is going to be pressed down by the weight of the roast that's on top of that. And so one of the things that I really love about this rub is that, and I'll pull you in close so you can just see the rub. So you'll notice that on this rub, I have actually designed it to use kosher salt so that I can actually see the amount of salt that is in, like, on when I put the rub onto the meat, you can actually see the amount of salt, because often salt is that one piece that is sort of uncontrollable. You don't really see the salt in rubs, and so you don't know how much rub to put on. But if you can see the salt, or see most of it anyways, it allows you to see how much more of the flavor of the spices and all the other components to the rub that's in there. Meaning you can do as much or as little as you want based off of how much salt you can see on that rub. All right, there we go. And so, yeah, just load that up. Make sure we get to the edges. There we go. And then just a nice firm pat. We don't want to rub it in. We just want to, you know, just make sure it's pressed into that meat. We'll flip it over. Again, we've already put that mustard on there, so all we need to do is grab our rub and apply that. There we go. And so again, this is sort of the beauty of this cut, is that it doesn't take a long time to actually prepare. It really just, it's simple. And that's one of the things I love about pork and pork loin specifically, that you really can't mess it up. You know, it's simple. There's not a lot of trimming. Oftentimes the amount that I trimmed off, that's the most I've trimmed off in a long time. The one I have cooking over here, I didn't trim anything to it. Maybe one little piece like this big, and that's about it. And so pork loin, you can't really mess up. as long as you have a good technique on how you apply your rub, as well as good fire management and a delicious rub, you're going to have success every single time. That's my opinion. And so, okay, so we have now our pork loin rib section seasoned up, rubbed down, ready to go. And so from this point, what I would do is I would actually let it sit for as much time as I have. Oftentimes with videos, I only have about 30 minutes between this point and the next step of filming. If I'm cooking at home for my family, you know, I'll often do this a couple hours advance. If I know I'm going to be pressed for time, I'll just do it the night before I go to bed, put the seasoning on it, and then just cover it with a loose sheet of, not aluminum foil, plastic wrap. And the reason why you want to just let it sit for a little bit is because the salt that is in that rub is going to absorb into that pork roast. And so what happens when the salt absorbs in is the salt, like I said, absorbs into that meat and starts to release some of the juices. So you'll notice that some of the juices will actually come to the surface and it'll just kind of sit there. But then the interesting thing about it is that the salt grabs that moisture and sucks it, like it grabs onto it and pulls it back in to the center of the pork. And so that your salt and your seasoning isn't just on the outside, but it actually is absorbed into the inside. And let me say this, it's just the salt. You know, the garlic that's in here, the onion that's in here, the sugar that's in here, all the different flavors that are in the rub don't absorb into it. It's the salt. There might be a little bit of pass through, a little bit, but for the most part, it's basically just the salt that is going to absorb into that. And the thing about this is the salt denatures the proteins a little bit, making every bite a little bit more tender and juicy, or a little more tender. But it also, because the salt brings that moisture back in, it actually holds on to, almost locks it in a little bit, making every bite a little bit more juicy than if you just seasoned it and threw it on the grill. And so that's a really neat trick when it comes to cooking barbecue, because, you know, I've had a lot of barbecue in my days. And one of the things that I've noticed just is that, you know, sometimes it's really nice to have salt on the surface. Like if I'm doing a steak, I love that saltiness on the outside of the surface. But when you have a big cut like this, or like a pulled pork, like a Boston butt or a brisket, and it's quite thick, you want to be able to taste the seasoning of the salt in the center of the meat, because oftentimes you don't actually have the outside to bring into your palate when you take that bite. Sometimes it's just the middle. And if there's no rub in the middle and all you can get is the seasoning, you know, it's better to have some of that seasoning absorb into the middle. And that is what we call a dry brine. And so basically any rub that has salt in it, you can do this with, and the salts will melt into the meat and you're left with delicious seasoned bite every time. And so these rubs, any of the rubs on the Rub Society would do this. If you're not using a rub or using a salt-free rub, all you do is take some kosher salt, about a half a teaspoon of kosher salt per pound of meat. I tend to go slightly over that ratio and put it on, let it sit for a few hours or overnight, and then come back, hit it with a little bit of olive oil or whatever binder you're using, and then apply your non-salt rub to the outside surface of your pork loin or whatever cut you're using. And so that's sort of a general just tip for life. It's kind of a neat thing. So here we go. This pork loin is all done. It's all prepped. I told you it wasn't very simple, or it wasn't very hard. Very simple way to do this. And so now that's we got to pull this pork loin off. This is perfect timing. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to put this onto the grill. And about 2.5 hours ago, I put on a second one of these onto the grill. I've been smoking it for that time with some hickory wood as well as some cherry wood. I love the way cherry wood flavors pork. It's probably actually just one of my favorite types of wood to use in general when cooking pork or really anything, actually, because it's just so good. It's got that bit of sweetness. It gives a nice, rich, like mahogany color to the outside surface of it. And so I'm gonna just quickly grab this other pork loin I've been cooking and pull it off. And so just give me a second here. Let me just sort this out. I got some other stuff on the table. Okay. What am I doing? Okay, here we go. Joe, I'm gonna grab you, bring it a bit closer so you can see this. So this is what it looks like when it's all done. So we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We've got some nice rich color on there. This thing looks really nice. And so let me just switch this glove out. And actually, we're also going to, don't want to use my hands. We're going to put this one onto the grill. And then I'm going to grab my thermometer. So whenever you're cooking, I always recommend using a digital thermometer. And this is a leave-in thermometer. And we're just going to place that into the center of, here, see here. So we're going to place this kind of as far in as we can. So about there. You can go in the side, you can go in the top. For this one, I'm just going to go in the top. Just like that. Looks pretty good, eh? Okay, let's move some of this out of the way.
Hey, Jabin, just a quick question we've got here, mate. What temperature did you cook it at?
Yeah, so it might jump you back over here. Here we got our nice snow in the background. Oh, look at this. It's like, it's winter for sure. And so, yeah, so the way I've set the grill up for this cook is I always cook pork tenderloin, pork loin between 275 and 300. And so this one, the one I just took off was about 275 from beginning to end. This one will be, again, about that 275. I probably will bump it up a little bit near the end to that 300 just to speed things up because we got to eat dinner. So what I'm using today is a kettle grill. And so this is a Slow and Sear kettle. The easiest comparison is a Weber kettle. This one just has some extra features on it that makes cooking very convenient, very easy to use. I'm also using the Slow and Sear charcoal basket. If you have really any other charcoal basket, you can use that. If you don't have a charcoal basket, you start with some coals lit on one side and then add in some unlit briquettes on the other side, and we'll just sort of travel all the way along. And so for this one, I started with my hot coals here, added in my unlit briquettes, and then I put on about 3 or 4 chunks of hickory and cherry wood, as mentioned, just to add that smoky flavor. And so we have that set up. This has a water reservoir in here. I'm not using that. If you have that, you can, but I find the bark just doesn't set up as quickly, just because it's a little more humid in the chamber. And so I'm going to close this up. Get you back over here. That's pretty much it. That's how I would prepare and season and sort of get everything ready for that. And so as it's cooking, like I said, this is going to take about 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on the size. This is about 3.3 kilograms, which is about 6.5 pounds for this one side, which is it's probably average, about 6 to 7 pounds, about average size rib roast. And so I toss it on there, and during the cooking process, because it doesn't take a long time, this is where I do all my extra prep. And so just like pulled pork, I just sort of think about what I enjoy personally on a pulled pork sandwich. For me, that's the pulled pork. That is a nice brioche bun. That's what we have. here, brioche bun, we have coleslaw with some nice coleslaw dressing and a bit of barbecue sauce. And so that's what I would prep sort of in between while I'm waiting. So I'm just gonna move this bun off to the side. The only thing I was just about to jump on the call and I realized, shoot, I didn't cut my apple. So we're gonna do that together. And so basically when we're cutting our apple, this is gonna be for our coleslaw. And this makes a really nice apple slaw that complements that pork very, very nicely. And basically what I'm doing is I'm taking up my apple, I'm cutting it about that thick, right? And then again, about French fry, and then half. That's all. Yep. There we go. Cut it in half. So you can see this, there's not a lot of prep to this whole dish, but when you're done, it will wow you. I told my son today that I was making this for you guys, and he got super excited because he knows how good it is. And so basically the ratio that I'm using is 1 apple. And then after that, when I go to add the coleslaw, I'm just gonna match 1-to-1 that coleslaw salad. And if you're not familiar with coleslaw, I'm assuming you have it over in Australia. Basically, it's just cabbage, green cabbage, some purple cabbage, and a little bit of carrots in this one anyways. And so I'm gonna dump some of this in this bowl. And again, we're going about 1-to-1 ratio on this. You can also kind of do it like how we're doing it today, where we're cooking. You got your pork loin off, and it's just resting. And I'm not gonna be able to rest it for as much time as I normally would. But when it comes off, you're looking at resting for probably about 20 minutes or so. And about 20 minutes or so. And then, so you can do all your preparation for your coleslaw during that time. And so we have 1 part apple slices and 1 part coleslaw. And then we have our coleslaw dressing. Every region seems to have their own version of coleslaw dressing. This is my favorite. This is one I've been using for probably about 10 years with just subtle tweaks. There's no real recipe. All I can tell you is that it's mayonnaise, right? Hellmann's mayonnaise. Then I add in apple cider vinegar for consistency. And so this is your option now to, if you like your coleslaw dressing a little bit thinner, you add a little bit more apple cider vinegar. If you like it a little bit thicker, you add a little bit less apple cider vinegar. And so it's more just to consistency. And then once you have your consistency, you add in a little bit of sugar to taste. And so again, if you like it a little more sweet, add a little bit more. If you don't like it sweet at all, don't add any. It's up to you. And then once we have the sweetness, the consistency, and that tang from the apple cider vinegar, then I usually grab in any of the rubs. Today, I think I use the chicken rub actually, because it's got that little bit of garlic. And I put a little bit of that in there, about a teaspoon or so of rub into this. Give it a good shake. And all I'm gonna do now is just pour that in. And you can see that consistency. Let's see here. Oh, that's good stuff. Oh, and so the reason why I love to put some of that barbecue rub in there is because it complements the flavor of the pork loin, because the pork loin has that nice barbecue rub and that flavor of classic barbecue in the rub. And so by adding some of that rub into that coleslaw dressing, it's going to complement that flavor. I'm just going to quickly mix this up. So just take a look at this. Doesn't that look really nice? And so the great thing with an apple The great thing with an apple coleslaw is that you get, obviously the coleslaw, the classic flavor, but then that apple adds a bit of sweetness and a bit of extra crunch that is more crunchy or crispy than, that's not the right word. You know what I mean? It's got that little bit of crunch to it that's a little bit more than coleslaw. And then the sweetness and that flavor of the apple really just complements the pork loin so nicely. And when I was growing up, we would always do pork loin or pork chops with some applesauce. And so this is kind of a take on that. So everything's done. We have our pork loin. We're going to say that it's rested for 20 minutes or more, but it hasn't. That's between you and I, okay? Don't tell anyone. We got our pork loin. What I'm going to do, let's get that here. So our pork loin, it's all done. So when it comes to cutting this thing, this is where you want to cut it properly. Traditionally pork chops are cut, in big sections, like an inch to inch and a half, but then cooked over fire. And, you have your surface that gets that Maillard reaction, which adds a lot of extra flavor. With this, because it is, so we're going back to the very beginning, because we do have that fattier meat, which is a little bit more tough. And then in the inside, we have that, the tender, or sorry, the loin portion, the leaner loin portion. We want to cut it thin. And that's because of that fattier section is a little bit more chewy, just like if you undercook ribs. And so, but if we cut it thin, and I'm talking as thin as we can, we're not looking for pretty, we're looking for thin. If we cut it as thin as we can, then that's the magic. And you can see, you can't see, but I can see juice is just starting to run out of this thing. And so what I'm going to do, I can use my hands because it's my house, my rules, right? And so I'm just going to, let's see. We got the first one. And then from there, we're just going to cut it as thin as we can. So just look at this. You have the outside here that has our rub and our sauce on there. The inside, you can see that it's a little bit, it's got lots of that, the fatty tissues on the inside. I'm gonna tell you, that melts in your mouth. And so if this is all you wanted to do, go for it. This is good on its own. You mix in some potatoes, some broccoli, whatever it is you want. And this is going to be a standalone dish on its own. But like I said, it gets better if you take a little extra time to make some sandwiches. Let me just cut some of this for you. Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay, so now when it comes to our sauce, and so I'm going to I'm jumping around a little bit because I thought that this pork loin is going to come off a little bit earlier. I was going to give you sort of the full tutorial on how to cook the pork loin on the grill. And again, you can use whatever grill you have. I'm using the kettle grill. If you have a pellet grill, it's the same sort of method. You just do indirect 275 degrees. If you do an offset, it's already indirect 275 degrees. If you have a gas grill, turn on one burner on one side and put your meat on the other side. Now it's indirect convection heat. It's going to come out great. And so about an hour in is when you're going to start to see that rub. 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, so Fahrenheit in terms of cooking temperature. So about an hour into the cook, what you're going to notice is that the rub and the outside surface of that meat is going to start to not dry, but start to get a little bit on the drier side. And at that point, you can give it a spritz if you like. If you're going to spritz it, I always recommend half apple cider vinegar, half water. It's just my preference. You could use apple juice, you could use beer, you could use water and whiskey, you could, whatever you want. I've used fruit punch on ribs before. It came out amazing. You know, barbecue, you cook for you. If you like something, go for it. It's not the end of the world if it's not how everyone else does it. You cook for you, and unless you're doing competitions, it's going to come out great the way you like it. So about an hour in, you can give it a spritz. I chose not to spritz this one because it still has some nice hydration on the outside. And then when it reached about 130 degrees, I did go ahead and sauce it. And so what I did is I made up a quick sauce. I tweaked a sauce. I'm a big fan of saving time, keeping things simple. And so what I have here is just some store-bought sweet sauce. This is Sweet Baby Ray's original. I don't like any of the other stuff, but the original actually, for me, I enjoy it, but I tweak it. I take this and fill up my bottle about 2/3 of the way, open it up. Then I grab some apple cider vinegar. And then I'm gonna fill up the rest of the bottle about 1/3 of the way extra. Put my lid on, give it a shake. And so now you'll notice that it's a lot more liquidy. And so this is gonna be sort of the sauce that I would use when I'm brushing on that sauce at that 130 degree mark. And the reason I'm doing it at 130 degrees is because at that point, it's going to be about 10 to 15 minutes until the roast, that pork loin roast finishes. And so it's going to allow enough time for that sauce to set up and get a little bit tacky and just provide a little extra flavor. So when you're done that, when everything's done, you've sliced it like we've done. We're now at this point where we're building our sandwich. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that sauce, put some on the bottom. Then this is the fun part. We're going messy. We're just putting as much on here as we want. Leave that piece off because that's just the end. Look at that. Oh my goodness, this looks so good. Okay, I don't know if you can tell, but doesn't this already look like pulled pork? Like take the like that pulled texture out of the equation, but just sort of looking at it, this looks like a fake pulled pork sandwich done in 2 hours. From there, we're going to take our sauce. We're going to add in some more. And the reason why I like to add that vinegar is because it adds a little bit of tang. And there's already vinegar in the in our coleslaw as well, which is going to add to that. I normally use a spoon for this, but I forgot it inside. We're going to take our coleslaw. We're going to put a generous helping of that on there. A little extra on the bun. Not a lot, just a little. Place that on there. And bam, look at that. Oh my goodness, I can't wait. Any rest time or straight to the table? Usually when the pork loin comes off, I like to let it rest for about 20 minutes or longer. Usually I don't have enough time because the family's like hungry. I got 3 boys, and so they're always eating something, it feels like. And so we're often let it rest for 20 minutes. But if you have a little more time, go for it. If it's cold, like right now, it's freezing, like it's right at the freezing mark. And so this one is it's cooling fast. And so I would normally just tend to kind of let that temperature drop a little bit slower than just like flash cooling. My boy eats for 3. Yeah, but take a look at that. Okay, I'm gonna make you all jealous. I'm gonna go for the taste test on this one. Oh my goodness, where do I start? Right here. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't talk my mouth full, but this is freaking amazing. Two hours gives you the flavor and similarity to a 10 to 12 hour cook. This is why this is one of my favorite cuts to cook up, because it's fast, it tasting amazing, and it can literally feed this whole thing. Could probably feed about easily 12 people. So for me, just the meat alone for this one was $14. And so that's $1 a person if you're thinking budget. Pork is a lot cheaper than beef. It's similar price to chicken over here. Done a variation with beef. Yeah, if I'm using beef, I'm using a ribeye. Or sorry, not ribeye. Eye of round in making sliced roast beef sandwiches. But instead of the coleslaw, then I'll add on looks like a horseradish mayo, which again is very similar to the coleslaw dressing. And so because it has that bit of tang, but instead of the barbecue rub, there's some horseradish, maybe a bit of garlic in there or some chives. But we're keeping it simple. The base of that often is mayo and apple cider vinegar to taste. Then we're adding in other components to it just to give some nice extra flavor to whatever it is we're cooking. And so that's basically it. This is my favorite one. I shouldn't say my favorite, because a lot of things are my favorite. Great 3 hour. I missed the rest of that. Yeah, you're welcome. So like I said, if you've never tried this, this is one of my favorites. If sometimes it's hard to actually find the rib section of the pork loin. If you can't find the rib section, I've done this numerous times with the center cut. Again, that's that leaner section. You're not going to get as much of that fatty meat, but as long as you cut it thin, that's the key. You cut it as thin as possible, and then the center cut tastes just as good. I shouldn't say that. Similarly as good. And so that's pretty much it. If you find the sirloin section, then that one's great too, because it does have a little bit different connective tissue that resembles this a little bit more, but it's a little more close to the center cut portion. Yeah, now you're hungry. There we go. And so I was going to say something. I can't remember what it was though. But yeah, this is just really why I love pork loin. If I'm going to have people over for dinner, this is often what I'm going to cook, because they've had pulled pork, they've had brisket, they've had ribs. But if you want to sort of wow people and give them something that they can hold in their hands and eat, and sort of like party mode, this is a great option, just because it's a little bit different but similar enough to make them feel comfortable and at home, sort of like it's a meal they've had numerous times, but just done in a little bit different way. The other nice thing is that when you have this cut, because it is a larger cut, you're going to have a lot of leftovers. For me, I'm doing this one that we just took off, as well as the second one that we prepared on the grill. And so I'm going to have two. And so what I'll do with leftovers is the one, I'm just going to slice it as thin as possible through the entire thing. The second one, I'm going to probably cut about, let's see, how many people in my family? I'm going to cut four like inch to inch and a half thick chops out of it. And that's going to take up about half of that roast. And I'll put those in the freezer. And then all I have to do, because it's already cooked, is pull them out of the freezer, defrost them to room temperature, and then just warm them up. It's a great, 10-minute cook sort of thing. Throw them over some charcoal, and now you've got the smokiness from what we've already done, but then you're just essentially warming it up back to whatever temperature you want, just not over 140 degrees. This one here, I did pull off at 140 degrees. In Canada, I think they actually say to pull it at 165. In the States, it's 145. And so I pull this one at 140. And then as it rests, it will rest up to about that 145 degree mark. And so it's incredibly juicy. yeah, some things you can do with the leftovers. Again, we always just do sandwiches. You can throw this on some nachos. You can make some tacos with it. You can throw it in some omelets or eggs in the morning. Really, the opportunity and options are endless when it comes to this cut. And so I hope you give it a try. I hope this was helpful, just from some of the prep to, just the idea even of what you can do with an inexpensive cut, because we don't always have to be cooking briskets. We don't always have to be cooking these expensive cuts. We can take a simple cut that's budget friendly and turn it into something that will just wow anyone who eats it. I've fed this to probably 100 or so people, and yeah, try it on your next cook. And so I've done this for 100 plus people just over the years, people coming to visit or whatever, and the response is the same every time. It's just one of the best things they've had. So that's about it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jabin. I do have some questions for you. One that I thought of going through. So from someone who lives in summer with such a harsh climate, it's probably not the right word, but can get so cold. In Australia, obviously, depending on where you live, we might have some people from Canberra in our group. It can get quite cold. What tips or tricks would you give the pitmasters in the group today about cooking? I mean, we're in summer at the moment, so it's absolutely prime smoking weather. But obviously, when it gets to winter, we all tend to put the grills away for a few months. There you go. March just said Canberra here, and it's cold. It's the middle of January, Mark. It should be a heat wave at the moment. So, what tips and tricks would you give to these other pitmasters about maintaining temp or still being able to cook when the weather gets a little bit colder?
Yeah, I would say, well, for me, one of the new things for me this winter is actually some gloves. Like these they're called grease monkey gloves, but they're just black little things. They help with when you're prepping, but if you're touching raw meat, you can just quickly pull it off. But they also keep your hands warm. So that's just from being the cook and having to cook outside. It's just one of those little things. But when it comes to like fire management and stuff, you're obviously going to burn more coals in the wintertime, because your air temperature, your coal temperature and your air temperature are so drastically different that your cold air is going to cool the outside of the grill, right? And so it's going to burn through your coals a little bit faster, which isn't the end of the world, because that light, hang on. How's that? Is that okay?
Yeah, you're all good.
Yeah, so it's not the end of the world, because when you have a hotter fire to compensate for your colder temperatures, you're actually burning a cleaner fire. And so it means whatever wood you add to the grill is going to burn a little bit cleaner. You're going to get that aromatic flavor from the cherry wood or the apple wood or the hickory wood or whatever. And so the only thing I really notice is that you just need to add a few more coals, and then after that it's just fire management, just like you normally would. Again, because it is colder, if you open your lid and too much, it's going to have to recharge the inside temperature, and so you want to keep your lid closed as much as possible. That's pretty much it. I mean, for me, it doesn't get below 0 very often. The fact that we have a foot of snow right now is a little bit rare, maybe once or twice a year. So yeah, it's pretty mild here.
Got another one here. This is from one of your eager YouTubers who's watched you. They've said that in your early videos you used Weber kettles. You've now moved over to an S&S grill. What's your preference?
Oh, I'm S&S guy. I started out with a grocery store $17 Canadian kettle grill, and it sucked, but it did the trick. It's the thing that I learned, with a grill that is not as good as others. the learning curve is a lot steeper, right? And so you have to figure out sort of its quirks. And so when I got rid of that one and moved to a Napoleon kettle, so that Napoleon is a Canadian made company, but they're around the world. That grill was a huge step up, but it had its own quirks too. You know, it didn't have, you know, great, there was lots of air leaks with it, but it was great. I learned a lot more from that one. And then went from the Napoleon to the Weber, and that was almost game changing because of how airtight it was. And then I used that one for a number of years, and then finally moved over to this one here, the S&S kettle. And, you know, end of the day, it's very, 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 very similar to the Weber kettle. The only difference is, you know, it's got an included side shelf. It's got a thermometer right on the front. Right. So like right now, for example, this is 250 degrees. This says 250 degrees. And so the thing I love about it is that you don't actually need to use an ambient temperature probe, because your temperature gauge on the front is actually accurate, which is, in my opinion, is game changing. Then some of the other little features of it, I'm going to be, don't tell anyone, but I'm going to be getting rid of my Weber, just because this hasn't been used since February. So almost a year it hasn't been used. So, yeah.
Easy. And the last one I've got here, and everyone else feel free to jump in if you do have any before we wrap this up. You see, you've done the pork loin today with that sort of barbecue style, barbecue sauce, sweet baby rays. Can you use any other flavors with the pork loin? Could you put a hint of Mexican seasoning on it and turn it into a Mexican flavor? Is there other things you can do with the pork loin?
Yeah. Pork loin is very versatile in its flavors, because pork loin is almost like chicken breast, where it doesn't have a lot of big, bold flavor. And so it really adapts well to different flavors. So you could do the same cook, but use a honey garlic sauce, or a teriyaki, or go full on Mexican with it and make some like al pastor, you know, seasonings and attach it to that. You know, you could do a lot. You could, you bacon wrapped pork loin. That's amazing. If I'm going to be using this cut, I often don't inject it, just because it's got a lot of that fattiness in it already. If I'm using a center cut, I'll inject it with like apple juice or mango juice, or kind of whatever's going to complement that cook. One of my favorite things, actually, one of my favorite barbecue sauces, it's on my channel, is a bourbon barbecue sauce. It goes really great on pork loin. You just have to have bourbon in the house, which for me, it's only a few times a year when I have some bourbon in the house. But yeah, it really adapts well to the flavors of really anything, because it is a little bit more of a mild flavor that can adapt and bring flavor into it.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, do we have anything else before we wrap it up? I think we're all good, Jabin. That has been absolutely incredible, mate. Thanks for giving that. And I don't know about everybody else, but I enjoyed it for the reason that you said, that we always do brisket, we always do pulled pork, we always do pork ribs. It's nice to just see a different kind of meat and what you can do with it. And the good thing about it is it's 11 o'clock in Adelaide, it's 11:30 in the eastern states. You can still go down your butcher, pick up a pork loin, and you can have it on by tonight. I don't know about you, but I quite often sit on YouTube watching videos, Jabin's YouTube channel, and I'll go, far out, I feel like eating something. And then you look at the time and you go, I don't have 8 hours up my sleeve. I can't do this. So this is, I think, an amazing recipe that we can use. Now, I think Jabin's going to send out a recipe, or he'll forward it on to me, which I will send through to everybody who's attended this evening. So we'll send out a little bit of a recipe card. Included in that will be a link to Jabin's socials. I am not just saying this because he's on here today, but one of the reasons we picked Jabin for a supplier of the Rub Society was because of how good his social media was. the time and the care that he took to put it all together. And he just looked like, and as you can see today, he's proven it. He just looked like someone who knew what he was talking about, and his rubs definitely proved it. So just like last week, I'll pop it in here now. If you type in Postal 10 onto the Rub Society tonight or today, you can get 10% off any of Jabin's rubs. That'll run for a week. So make sure you jump onto our website and pick up some of his rubs. And then, yeah, if you do give this pork loin a go, make sure you tag myself and Jabin in the photos on Instagram, and we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds good.
All good. So that is it for this week. We now go back to back with our masterclasses. So next week we're going from Vancouver Island down to Texas to one of our other exclusive providers, which is the Butcher's Cut. And he's going to be showing us how to do some Texas beef ribs. And then we'll be finishing off the series with probably someone that you guys all know, Aaron from Low and Slow Basics in Adelaide as well, who obviously the creator of Steak Shooter, Garlic Goals, and Low and Slow Basics on YouTube as well. He's going to show us what to do with some steaks. So, Jabin, on behalf of the Rub Society and all of our everyone on board here, thank you for your thanks for your time. Thanks for the time difference as well, and to everybody who has joined us from around Australia. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this. One day I hope to get down to Australia and cook with you guys and have some fun and get out of this cold weather.
Exactly. It looks way too cold over there for any Aussie right now.
It is.
Easy. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great morning.